Okay, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It's my complete pleasure to be here with Alison Wisdom to talk about her captivating and unsettling debut novel, We Can Only Save Ourselves. So I'm Kate Day. Hi. And we were just talking about how we're going to appreciate that we're getting to do this intimate conversation in our own homes, and we're going to keep it fun and casual, and there might be a dog or a child, and if there is, it will give you a nice authentic look at what it's like being a writer and a mother, which both Alison and I are. I am Kate Day. I'm the author of 2 novels, If Then and In the Quick, which is out March 2nd this year. And we want to convey our deep, deep appreciation to Barbara's Bookstore. Indie bookstores and in booksellers mean the world to authors right now. We cannot do what we do without you, so thank you. I wanted everyone to sort of see that we have a button at the bottom where you can click and get 10% off Alison or my debut novel. And I think you can get 10% off pre-ordering my novel that's coming out in March as well. And there's also some specific links here to the right for both books. So shop indie as opposed to the other options that you can click on easily. This is just as easy. And we also wanted to make sure that everyone knows that you can press ask a question down here. It doesn't look like a button, but it is. So instead of chatting with us, we would love it if you would ask us any questions you'd like us to get to in the last 15 minutes. If you could just press ask a question and type your question in, and we will get to those. So go ahead and do it while you're thinking about it, because I know in these events, I always am thinking about stuff. And then by the time we get to the end, I've forgotten what I asked. So just do it as we're as we're talking. That would be great. So I think I talked about all the housekeeping type things. So we're going to be talking about cults, teenage protagonists, and the novel's truly unique and beautiful collective narrative voice. But to start off, Alison, for people who haven't read the book, which it just came out yesterday, so we can assume a lot of people who are listening or watching right now haven't read it yet. Can you just sort of set the stage for us about the main character, Alice, and sort of the world that the book introduces us to?
Yeah, for sure. Although I can't believe y'all didn't stay up all night to read it.
I'm sure some people did.
Yeah, I'm sure. So We Can Only Save Ourselves follows a girl named Alice Lange. She is the kind of perfect golden girl. She's 17. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's well-liked. Everybody loves her. She's kind of the star of her idyllic neighborhood, but she uncharacteristically commits an act of vandalism and decides, you know what, I'm giving up this life by the conventional role that's expected of me as a future wife and a mom, and I just met this guy, this charismatic, kind of dangerous man named Wesley, and I'm just gonna follow him and see what happens. So it turns out that he actually is already living with some other girls who are young like Alice, and they too are looking for new lives and adventure and kind of seeking authenticity. And so Alice falls in with these girls and with Wesley, and Wesley starts making these demands on them, and tensions rise in the house, and things get bad. But meanwhile, I should point out that the book is narrated by the mothers who are left behind in Alice's neighborhood, so while Alice is gone, they're worried about Alice. They're mourning her disappearance, but at the same time, they resent the fact that she has challenged this lifestyle that they have worked so hard to afford themselves, and having to reckon with the fact that maybe things aren't actually as perfect as they had hoped they were.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Do you have a long-standing interest in cults? I'm just wondering about what research went into this, or you didn't do research because you'd already read like a ton of books about cults.
I mean, I've always been interested in cults. Like, I mean, I think back to like, I mean, even as like a little kid, before I knew what a cult was, like, I remember one of the very first things I was really interested in was the Salem witch trials. And I was like, this is like fascinating. The fact that there could be like this whole group of people who are kind of thinking the same thing. And it's just been an interest that's carried over always. An interest in kind of fringe groups and fringe beliefs and people who are embracing an alternative lifestyle. And especially when that lifestyle is, you know, kind of creepy or kind of dangerous. It's always been something that has been interesting to me, at least as an outsider, not as something I want to participate in myself.
Just thinking about what you said about the idea of the fringe groups. What did you see? I guess it's more of like a craft question, but how did you create this really lovely tension between the sort of two things of the book, the group that's outside, and then this collective voice of the suburban moms?
Yeah. So when I started writing this book, I had been researching a lot about cults. I mean, aside from like just an interest in them, I knew I did want to do some kind of writing project with cults. And so I was reading about different kinds of cults, and I got to the Manson family, which if you've read the novel, it might seem a little bit like, oh, this kind of reminds me of the Manson family, and that is in there. But I was really struck by this claim as I was researching about that this historian made, that the murders of Sharon Tate and her friends, and then the LaBiancas, the other couple that was killed by the Manson family, marked the end of the 60s, both as an era and also as an ideology. And like there had been, of course, you know, danger always. The Vietnam War was being fought, but it was not here. And while they knew people who were fighting over there, it wasn't on our soil. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's a danger that is, you know, everywhere. And you can be a movie star and that's not going to help you. You can be a completely normal couple and that's not going to help you. And so when I knew that when I was starting to write about it, I was so interested in kind of that reckoning, partly because I, like Kate has said, I'm a mom, and I was a new mom at this point, and I too was having to come confront the fact that there were so many things in the world that I couldn't control, and I couldn't keep my you know, precious little baby safe from. And so I knew that was something I wanted to explore, and I did want to have kind of the dichotomy of the girls and the suburban moms as like both a foil for each other and a mirror of each other. And so it was really important to me that they seem similar, more similar as the book goes on, that there's a little bit of the same kind of mindset in both groups.
Oh, that's really interesting. Can you say a little bit about, the book has been described as tonally as dreamlike and hypnotic, and it has this it definitely casts a spell. And I wonder if that's a piece of what you're talking about just now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's an effect of the narration of the mothers in the first person plural. It gives it, I mean, my intent with it was I wanted it to be almost mythological. In the sense that, you know, you've got the Greek chorus, but more than that, I wanted it to be, if you think about mythology as like an origin story of how beliefs came into being, I wanted this tale of Alice to reflect the kind of origins of this neighborhood and how things come about in this neighborhood, why these mothers make the choices they make. And so I did want it to be kind of this dreamy, out of time, out of place a little bit, to kind of capture that mythological feeling and kind of the timelessness of the issue of, no matter where you are in time and, 100 years from now, we're still whoever's around is still gonna be having to face the same truths about, security versus kind of just the inherent danger of existing in the world.
Yeah. I know the whole of that's fascinating. That makes total sense. As I was reading, I was thinking, oh, is this how you get sort of lulled into a cult? Sort of like, you think, when you read about people, you think, well, how did this happen? But this book made me really sort of think about, it's not like, obviously you're not thinking in a rational way, you're thinking in the sort of intuitive way. And it also, it just sort of thought to myself, oh, well, right, I guess both these ways of living are cult-like, you're lulled into a certain state of being by certain norms. And it was interesting, the effect on, as a reader, sort of being lulled, but at the same time, sort of being aware I was being lulled. Nice job. That was strong work.
Yeah, definitely. I hope, I think it's a great way to describe it, the kind of lulling, or, not to take it always back to mythology, but kind of the siren song. You are distracted by the beauty of something or the appeal of something, and suddenly you're in a bad spot. And that's definitely what has happened to Alice. I mean, there is something very appealing to Wesley. He's saying, I see you in a way that no one else sees you. And that's such just a basic human desire. You mentioned, why does somebody end up in a cult? And it's, frankly, cults appeal to a very fundamental human desire of acceptance and, security, or answers to questions you might have. So yeah, there's definitely, an appeal to that. And I mean, honestly, as a teenager, if you think back to when you were 17, there's an appeal to just danger as well. Alice can tell that Wesley is bad news a little bit, but she likes that.
Right. When you're a teenager, you just really want to do something and you don't know what. And I thought it was interesting how she starts with this very universal sort of impulse. And it's almost by chance that that's where she lands. And I thought that was really interesting. And also, as a mother, I definitely was like, oh gosh, no.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that feeling, and not that you have to be a mother to enjoy the book, but for sure, I hope that it's resonant with anyone who's ever cared about a child being raised in the world. Oh dear.
At the same time, I will say it's very easy to identify with Alice too, because there's something kind of claustrophobic about the world that she's in, and that sort of that particular kind of hypnotic voice. You can see why she wants to just step out of it, at least for a little bit.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. I mean, especially even if you're just a regular kid, but if you're the star of the show, that's it's a heavy mantle.
Right. It seems very difficult to turn into something else when there's that level of expectation.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you start with the idea? I just came out of a book project where I had a protagonist that started at 12 and then went through till 18, which is very different from my first book. And I was wondering if you started, with the idea of a teenage protagonist, or did you actually start with the mothers and then move into the idea of Alice being the center of the book?
So I knew that I wanted Alice to be the center of the book. I knew that it was going to essentially be her story. But when I sat down to write, I had this image in my head. I don't know how it is for you when you begin a project. is my first novel, and it's my first, not the first one I've ever completed. Like, I did complete a bad novel, but like I'm still like figuring out how to do it. But so when I sat down to work on this project, I just had this image, and this is the beginning of the book, of a man walking down this street, and everyone in this neighborhood is turning to watch him because he's not a familiar figure. And the last person he comes to is Alice. And I knew that that's who I wanted to focus it on. What I didn't know was who was going to be telling the story. Like, when I sat down to write it, it came out as the first person plural. And I was like, it's the neighborhood narrating this story. But then, like, as I was writing, I was honestly probably like 100 pages into it, when I was like, okay, I can see this is the right instinct. Like, this was a good instinct to follow this voice of this particular perspective. But, I need to interrogate why that felt like the right choice, and like who specifically is the we telling the story. And it just like came to me, I was like, duh, it's the moms. It's like not just the generic neighborhood. And so I did have to like go back and figure that out and, change things up. But after I did that, I realized it was just as much a story about the moms as it was about Alice. And so even though the plot, is really a telling of Alice's story, the moms, if you're, reading between the lines, which is literally, their intrusions are often parentheticals. There's a story for them as well. And to me, it feels, almost equally important to just Alice's story, because her story affects who they are.
Sure. Yeah. So much of writing is trying to figure out why you have a certain instinct.
Yeah.
So that you can actually make it what it needs to be, because just instinct on the page is, especially with a long form project, it can't just end there. You have to sort of figure out what's underneath it.
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't ever want to write a novel. I started out writing only short stories, and that was like the only thing I wanted to do. And then like my MFA advisor was like, you need to have a novel. And I was like, I don't think I do. But then I started querying agents, and they were like, you really need a novel. But yeah, it was like, when you're working in something, the long form project, all of a sudden there's some questions you can kind of skirt a little bit in a short story that you cannot in a novel, and vice versa. There are things that a novel can do and get away with that a short story can't. So it's just been an interesting transition.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I literally have never written a short story.
It's hard. I mean, it's like, I know there are people who are like, oh, I can write a novel, but I just can't write a short story for the life of me. And when I did start trying to write a novel, I was like, well, really, each chapter is like a short story, right? And then I did that, and I was like, well, no, that's not how it works. Lots of trial and error.
I think for me, I don't have an MFA. I came from like a PhD background, so I mostly just studied novels, and that was my area of study. And I just hadn't really read that many short stories, so it was sort of like, but what hubris to start writing and just start with a novel. But I really didn't know, like, it wasn't the genre that I felt like most comfortable with. I definitely felt more comfortable with the novel.
Well, but just because you can write a short story, definitely, I mean, you can take it from me, like, doesn't mean you can, you're like, oh, well, I can do this now. And it's like, well, can you?
I think the two require totally different sort of psychological preparation and psychological sort of like daily finding ways to motivate yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is like a certain kind of depressing and excitement to like, wow, I wrote 3 pages, only 297 more to go.
Yeah.
It's just
actually, maybe this is a good moment. I'm sure that there are some writers who are watching or will be watching this once it gets posted, which it will. So permanently, so that people can watch it whenever they want. Can you talk a little bit about your process of writing this book? You said that you did have a drawer book. just say a little bit about how long it took for you to write. We Can Only Save Ourselves, and a little bit about your path to publication, because people always want to know that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like I can remember, it's always something like when
That's
I started.
What I wanted to know.
How do I get published in a short? Like, how do I publish a short story? And then it's like, how do I find an agent? Okay, now it's it's moving goalposts, but so I did. So I started out writing this novel, and this We Can Only Save Ourselves actually started as a storyline in that greater novel. And my plan, which sounded great in my head, was to have one novel with 3 different storylines, and each storyline was going to be about a different woman in a different cult. And in some magical way that I did not,
like a trilogy?
No, all in one novel.
Oh, all in one novel. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna weave them together. It was gonna be like, beautiful tapestry. So then I wrote it and I like finished it, and I was like, wow, that just really didn't come the way that I had planned.
Right. And a year or 2 at least had passed.
I mean, and like I had a baby, and so I was like, is my career kind of dead in the water already? I wrote this bad novel, and now I've got this baby, and she's always awake and she's never sleeping. Like, when am I ever going to do this? Yeah, so I decided then, I was like, okay, you know what? This one's over, but I love the characters in it. I'm going to take this novel apart, and I'm going to develop each storyline into its own novel. And out of those 3 novels, surely one of them will not be terrible. So
I like the strategy.
It's a numbers game. So I started with Alice, and because it felt the most fun to me. The voice was really fun. The subject was kind of fun. Like, I loved the girls that are in the bungalow with Alice. And so by the time I like really started working on it in earnest, I'd had my second child, and that was in the fall of 2018 that I just really like buckled down, and I was like, this is what I'm going to work on. And I had like a page count that I met every week. My family lives in Houston. I'm in Houston. And they live in the same neighborhood. So they would like babysit on the weekends. My husband would take over on the weekends. I would go and I would work. And my second baby did nap. So I could actually legitimately like get some stuff done while he napped, unlike the first baby.
I had the opposite.
Oh, I think that way is worse. Like, for me, it was like it can only go up from here.
Yeah.
And if you had the good one first and then the hard one, it's like, I got tricked.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I had finished it. I honestly had no idea if it was any good. But I had had a lot of short stories published. So I was like, okay, here's my plan to find an agent. I'm going to query with my story collection. And then I'm going to follow it up with, I do have a novel. Like, hopefully if you love me as a writer, that you'll be willing to like take a risk representing me on this novel that might be terrible. I just don't know. And my plan worked. I queried who would be my agent, Stephanie Delman, who is just the most wonderful. And she was like, I love your collection, but you need a novel. And I was like, well, I happen to have one. And that was in that following spring of 2019. And miraculously, she loved it. And we worked on it for a couple months. And then it went out on submission, and it sold that like June or July of 2019. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it happened. Like, just a lot of trying to figure things out. And then very quickly, which was crazy. And very surprising.
Like glacial pace. I had a very similar situation of it, like glacial.
Yeah.
Just like 15 minutes when the baby's like sleeping. Yeah. But that's like all he would nap or whatever.
Oh, I know. Just trying to like squeeze it in wherever. And it's hard.
But it's a little bit of whiplash too, if you're sort of used to writing without any expectation that an agent or an editor is going to read it, versus, you know, working with a whole host of professionals who are there to guide you, but also you can start to have like voices in your head that weren't there before and things like that.
And just knowing you have someone in your corner, I mean, it's so hard. You're writing this book and you're spending so much time, and it is like such an act of faith and an act of ego to like sit down and work on this thing that's like people might not ever see this, and like that's just so hard to sit in that uncertainty. It's hard.
It's a sort of a weird thing because it was like really hard at the time, but now like I do sort of think back on that time and think, oh, there was like a certain level of freedom in that, right? Because your career could be like anything. And you don't have you've never heard of Goodreads, and it's but overall definitely better to have those like really experienced readers who are waiting for that manuscript and, you know, have the best ideas about what to do with it.
Yes, so lucky.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit about the title of the novel?
Yeah, so I did not have a title for the entire time I was writing it, and I literally only gave it a title to send it to Stephanie, my agent. And I was like, I'm bad at titles. And so my like one tried and true trick is for like my short stories, I would just go through, you know, the 15 pages and try to find like a good phrase that I felt like encapsulated the book. And I was like, or the story. And I was like, I'll just try that with my novel. And I was like, oh, it's a lot of pages to go through. And so it did come from the book without trying to spoil, you know, kind of the context of it in the book. And I was like, this is a pretty good line. I feel like this could be a title. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, this is actually a great title. I did it finally, came up with a good title for something because it does encapsulate the book. You know, there are two groups. There's the mothers in the neighborhood, and then there are, you know, Wesley and his girls, including Alice. And while their lives look very different, the philosophies that they kind of practice are really very similar as far as like, you know, they're insular communities. They are not interested in what's going on outside of those communities. You know, Wesley talks often about like kind of the end times, and the end is coming. And it's like, well, according to Wesley, you know, everyone's going to die and things are going to catch on fire and be this huge disaster, but who cares? We can only save ourselves. And the same, like these mothers in the neighborhood, they're like, oh, you know, girls get abducted and murdered, and we can't fix that, but we can put in some streetlights, and we can put in like a security system, and you know, essentially, and we can take care of ourselves. And so it ended up being, I think, a really fitting title for what I hoped I could capture through the story of the mothers and Alice.
Yeah, that's interesting. Titles are tough, except when they're not. Sometimes like the best one occurs to you, like when you've only written 2 pages.
Yeah. Did you have that happen? I think If Then is like a perfect title.
No, If Then had like 4 gazillion titles.
Really?
And right before I started querying, I asked myself, like, if this was a movie, what would it, because I had sort of, I wanted to call it like counterfactuals, and people were like, is this a philosophy text?
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of really bad titles. And then I was sort of like, okay, I have to actually imagine, you know, what this would be like on the shelf. Like, what would the cover look like? And that's when I came up with that title. But my new book, I don't know where the title came from, but it literally was in my mind from like page 2.
That's amazing.
And I wish it was always like that, because the book I'm working on now does not have a title. And I have a feeling it's going to be like,
yeah,
we'll have like 10 before we land on one that everyone likes.
Yeah, so we're in that position with my second novel, trying to title it, and it's been like, I don't know, we can't. It's hard. It didn't come as easily. It hasn't come as easily.
Some projects like don't want to be named. Yeah. And someone told me like when you finally find the right title, that's when the book is done. I don't know if I 100% buy that, but
yeah, definitely not. I mean, of course my book was like finished, but then it went through like a million, I worked on, I think like 3 rounds of revisions with my agent before we went on sub. And then it, went through all the stages that a book goes through before it becomes a book. And but there was a title the whole time and it didn't ever change. So
I mean, some people have their title to change at like the last minute. I'm very glad that didn't.
Yeah.
To me or you, this is actually like a great time for you to tell us sort of what's going on with you right now, because as many of you know, publishing, you finished this book a very long time ago. And so tell us what you've been doing in the meantime, if there's like another project that you want to talk about. This is the moment.
Yeah. Well, 2020, the project has been just keeping everyone in my house alive.
Yeah.
It's been crazy and hard working. And I've kind of had to let go of what my expectations are for what I've been working on. Cause I'm someone who's always working. Like if I'm not writing, I feel like, panicky. Oh no, I'm never going to do this ever again. And everything's a disaster. And but I was lucky that I was very deep into a project already before things kind of came crashing down. And, when my editor had We Can Only Save Ourselves, and she was doing her end of things and making her edits, while she was doing that, I was working on my second project. And so I at least was like, well, at least I'm already in it. I'm not just like spinning my wheels trying to figure out something to do while also like dealing with a pandemic. And it's really hard. And if anyone was in that situation, I'm sorry. It's so miserable. But yeah, so I did sell my second novel. We have not officially announced it yet, but I did get the okay from everybody to share that my second novel, my same editor and imprint bought it, and it will be out in 2022. And it actually also came from the original Bad novel.
Wow, your plan totally worked.
It did. I know. Like that first plan to write the elegant tapestry novel did not work, but my other plans have worked. So
I love this because you didn't then all of that doesn't feel wasted. Because that's the worst feeling.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I mean, honestly, like in this new novel, that will be my second novel, like it is a far cry from what it was in the original novel. And I mean, probably like a total of like 5 pages will be the same, but it still doesn't feel like a waste.
Right.
Because it's like, the major character is the same. The setting is the same. So it also is about a cult, but this cult is set in like rural Texas, a very small town in Texas, and it follows a woman who's in her 30s, and she and her husband have found themselves in this fundamentalist religious community. And yeah, there's all kinds of strange happenings and things like that. I think if you like We Can Only Save Ourselves, you will like the second read.
So we have that to look forward to in 2022. And hopefully we will get to do in-person events.
I know. I'm hopeful. I'm like, but when this all happened, I was like, oh shoot, surely this will all be done by February and I can do at least some in-person events. And it's like, nope.
Yeah, nope.
I can't. But this is actually, I had my other launch event last night and it was so fun. And this has been like super fun. And
I think looking at it's pretty awesome that you can attend events like all over the country. and that I could do. I don't live in a major city, so this isn't typically something that I can do unless I, for like someone in my critique group or something, I would drive to Portland to do this, but it's not something I get to do a lot. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of silver linings. There's one other, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we can turn to if we have any questions from our audience. I want to know this from every writer that's living through this, especially those with young children at home. Sort of, can you give us a little window, if you are getting any writing done, like how you're doing that?
Yeah. So, it's been like, when this all started, my daughter was in preschool. And I was like, thank God we're not in real school, because that would be terrible. Trying to figure out how to do this from home. And then sure enough, kindergarten started, and it was like, well, okay, now she is in real school. And her school did open up in the fall here. In Houston, it wasn't so bad. And so, they gave kids the option to start in person or start at home, and we did at home for the first month, and we were supposed to do it for the first 9 weeks, but it was, just the most miserable. I know I don't have to tell you because you're doing it, but it was so painful because I also have a 2-year-old son, and he was stressed. I was stressed. It was a nightmare. So I wasn't getting anything done. Before that, I kind of just worked on the weekends. Like when everything was shut down, I would work on the weekends. Like I mentioned, my family, my mom and dad live in the neighborhood. So I would go sit on their back porch and work for a couple hours every weekend. And now my daughter is back in person in school, and my son's preschool open. There's 4 kids in his class, and he goes 2 mornings a week, and he just started, but last week. So I've not really gotten to have all that yet. But really, it's just been kind of like having to, like I said, redefine my idea of productivity, and especially with the launch, there's so much prep stuff that I'm not writing anything creatively. I've written, some essays, and I got to write a short story that came out in Catapult last week. And, but it's just been honestly finding any spare time, or being very much okay, y'all are all going outside in the backyard. Y'all are going to my parents' house. I have 2 hours. This is what I'm going to work on. And my husband is very supportive of that. And, he's very protective. He's more protective of my time than I am, because I'm such a pushover. I'm like, oh, it's okay. We can play Pretty Princess.
When they're in front of you, it's hard to say no to them.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, it's just, I think it's just kind of a struggle for everyone. Lots of reading though. I'm trying to read, and reading is for me, and I think for every writer probably, just, immensely helpful, and as well.
Have you read, do you want to tell us some things that you've read lately that you really enjoyed?
Okay, well, so coming up in a few weeks, The Upstairs House by Julia Fine is...
So excited about that, but I haven't read it yet. But
yeah, you will love it. It is...
I'm going to put it in the chat.
Yes, that's a great idea. So that I have, I got to read an early copy, and it's so great, and Julia is so smart and so wonderful, and definitely pre-order her book. We're actually going to be in conversation as well in a few weeks, and that's going to be so fun.
Yeah, great option to order from your from Barbara's bookstore or your local independent bookstore.
Yes. Let's see what else. Oh, my puppy just came into the room. All right. Since Barbara's did ask if we have. Here's. Oh yeah, we also got a puppy during this time.
Is that a boy or a girl?
It's a girl.
She's so cute.
Thank you. She's an absolute mess. She's probably going to go pee in the house now, just for good measure. So yeah, that's one I've been really excited about. The book I was like most looking forward to was Tana French's new book. It came out a few months ago, but I'm like a super fan, and so I had been really excited about that. The puppy's name is Sylvie. I just saw the the question, Sylvie. She's like 14 weeks, so she's still actually a baby. She's just giant. So let me think what else. The Girls Are Also Nice Here by Lori Elizabeth Flynn is coming out in March, and I got to read that early too. And, sorry, this sounds like bragging, but it was, it's dark, but like in a delicious way. And I think people really, really like it if you were interested in kind of the unlikable protagonist. But I also always have recommendations. What have you been reading that you like?
I don't know why I've been doing this to myself, but for my current project, I have been writing about a mother who sort of has a fraught relationship with her own mother and the memory of her own mother. And so I've just sort of been doing a deep dive on books I don't know why I'm doing this to myself right now, but I reread We the Animals, which I don't know if you've read that book, but it will just rip out your heart, bring it out, put it back in. I reread that, and then I'm in the middle of Shuggie Bain.
I haven't read that yet.
Which is so good, especially for a debut. It has all this sort of like Dickensian qualities to it. It reads a lot like his big social novels like Bleak House to me, which I love because that was my...
Oh, that's what you studied in school, right? For your PhD? Yeah.
And but it also does a lot of things that a Victorian novel would never do. But it has this sort of really layered interior. I guess it's not like I wouldn't call it like a book to read if you're feeling super depressed.
That's good to know. There's a time and a place for every book, and so made it.
I actually, for whatever reason, am not finding it to be like a downer for me. There's something about just sort of like this sort of, I don't know, bittersweet grief of it that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Suits my mood.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. I understand.
I'm also reading, we've been on a kick with I have a 10-year-old, and we've been doing sort of the YA versions of some beautiful adult biographies, like Unbroken we read, and then we just got, and I'm really excited to start a book that was important for my second novel, In the Quick, which is set partially in space. This book called Endurance, which is by Scott Kelly, and it's about his year that he spent in the International Space Station.
Oh, wow.
And kids are super nerds about space. And I love that their publishers are doing this. They're taking these books. I read that book, a couple years ago in its adult version. And now, they're not that different, but it's like right at the level where I'm reading it out loud to him, but he could definitely read it himself, like 10, 12, 11. Yeah, year old.
Yeah, that's
I like to mention what I'm reading with my kids because it's like one of the few bright spots.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so nice. Like, my daughter is about to be 6, and like, we read The Secret Garden, and
one of my favorite books.
Yes, she loved it, and we have started The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and it's fun getting to like read And right now we're reading some fancy dancy chapter books. So, you know, but it's fun. Like I love hearing about other parents with older kids who are getting to like, oh, that's my sister. And that's so special. Like I can remember reading, you know, the grown-up books, chapter books with my parents, and you know, it's so lovely to think about. So that's definitely a good bright spot.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, I have also been reading more than probably I did before the pandemic, and definitely reading more with my kids. Not, you know, not just at bedtime, which I always did because my kids never have gone back to school. So here with me for the last year. And so I really am just trying to like lean into as much as possible the things that are the good parts. And reading really is like the top of the list. It's not the longest. The good parts. It's not a long list. But the reading is definitely a big part of what's good about having all this time at home. And
it's so special. Okay, look, I think we have a question.
We do. How much do you write per day?
Oh, 0. Like
you should say like pre-pandemic.
I mean, honestly, like I am so much more productive with my time now that I have so much less of it. Like before, I really started writing seriously like a year before, 2 years, I guess, before I had my daughter. And I had been teaching high school. I quit teaching high school, and I was going to grad school, and I was doing private tutoring. And so I was like really, you know, kind of a stay-at-home human. I had a job, but it was flexible, and I set my own hours and however many students I wanted to take. And so I would have just like whole days where I'm like, all I'm going to do is write. And then I would just like, you know, fiddle around or whatever. And then when I had my daughter, I was still pretty strict about like the page counts. And like once I kind of, I mean, I guess I, you know, never really adjusted to having, like it took a long time to adjust to having a child. But then I would try to write like 6 pages a week. And I tried to be like super hardcore about it. Like if I didn't meet my page count, I was going to roll the pages over for the next week. And sometimes that happened. I know. I'm like
pages single spaced or 6 pages double spaced?
Double spaced always. But then I had my son, and it was like, well, you know, it's just, I really was only getting to work on the weekends anyway. And I set like very small goals for myself so that I can feel successful. Like, you know, I can just write a page, or, you know, when I'm writing a short story, I'm like, if I can write a page, that's great. With a novel, like if I can write 3 pages, that's great. And, you know, even that's like, you know, that gets to be a little bit harder. Actually, my little manageable goal gets harder and harder. But now, a few pages on the weekend. And then honestly, like I don't have much time during the week to write. Theoretically, when my son is in preschool and my daughter's in kindergarten, I should have some time. We've got this puppy. I mean, you know, it's always something, but I'm trying. Not a very inspiring answer, unfortunately.
I know. I think that's probably about as inspiring as you can be for this particular.
Oh, yeah.
Pre-pandemic, we have another question here, but I'll just say really quick, in case people want to hear from me as well. Pre-pandemic, I definitely would do all kinds of like word count goals and things depending on where I was at. If I was in like a generating phase, I had both kids in school for a full day school because my kids are older. And I was writing a book under contract, so I had a deadline. So I would definitely try to write like, you know, 500 words a day and things like that. Now the bar is like a lot lower.
Did I open my computer?
Yes. I mean, I think for me, the key, since I'm always working on something long form, and I'm working on a third novel right now, it's just if I could do anything to keep that project alive in my mind, that's a win for the day.
Yeah.
A lot of times I do write for at least for 15 minutes before I go to bed in like just in a journal. I don't mess with my computer unless I have something due at bedtime, but that's really the only time I often have is at night after everyone's gone to bed. And I will say, like, just those 15 minutes that I jot down some things that maybe occurred to me throughout the day or something I am stuck on, I'll just like write anything I can think of to write. And I will say, like, if I do get some time, you know, I have like some childcare for a part of the day, or my, you know, mom watches them for a little bit, then that writing that I did, maybe it's nothing that's going to like turn into a scene, but it's like primed me for actually sitting down and doing it.
Well, it's just like any muscle. You're just, I mean, I do like keep in my notes section on my phone, I do like jot a lot of notes down, and because my phone, if I open my computer, my kids are like personally offended by it. They're like,
oh yeah,
me.
I know a lot of writers. Yeah, I know some writers who write their entire book in their phone, and they have young children. That's the deal.
Yeah, it's just hard.
So we have a question. Diana wanted to know, is there a book that you remember first loving?
That's my mom, by the way.
Good question, Mom.
Yeah. Hi, Mom.
Okay, she's got the same last name.
Yes. Okay, without thinking about this like too hard, one of the earliest books I can remember loving is this like big mythology book, and it's like I can't even pronounce the name, but it starts with a D and it's got an apostrophe in it. Do you know what
my kid has it. I could like I know, like one room away.
Yeah, it's got the orange cover.
I had that one as well, and then I found it for my older kid.
I just ordered a copy for my daughter. She's turning 6 in a couple of weeks, and I was like, this is probably too early, but I like can't stop myself. And that was like one of the very first books. Like I was obsessed with it, and like it's, you know, my family always jokes that my interests have been consistent like my whole life. And I loved mythology from like the time I was a little girl, and I still love it now. And I studied classics in college, and that was like, but just the stories in there, and I like things a little bit dark, and mythology is like kind of perfect for that.
Yeah, people are eating each other.
Yeah, I mean, just like, you know, oh, you didn't put the right flag up on the ship, and now your dad thinks you're dead, and he like throws himself off a cliff. And like, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Is this? Like, I mean, I was just obsessed. And I still love it. Like, you know, obviously I've already brought up mythology like once in this interview.
I love mythology too. And I also studied classics in college. I don't think we've talked about this.
No. Oh,
yes. My Latin is pretty rusty at this point, but at one point I could translate all that Horace.
I know. I like feels like I cannot translate like a single more thing. Just, you know, my Latin is still like okay. My Greek is like non-existent at this point, but
I never actually studied Greek, but yeah, I think I don't read stuff in the original, but I still will get out my Ovid sometimes when I'm like stuck, because I don't know, there's something about that book that like just, I don't know, I read a couple lines and then I can write again.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yes. I mean, the kindred.
I think because those classical works, they're so loosey-goosey with like the rules of like reality, and I love that, because
me too.
Sort of get stuck in this like, well, people are doing normal things.
Yeah.
The way we and there's something like really not great for for artistic freedom when you're in that mode. And I love just reading something where it's like, oh, you know, I took off my head and I made it my leg, and then I walked, whatever it is. And it just, there's something like, oh, it like bursts open your brain for a minute, and then you can start thinking about, I'm not necessarily going to have a character make their head into their leg, but but it will like sort of like loosen you up, and you can think about, oh, okay.
Yeah. And because it's fun. I mean, for me, like mythology, I'm like, these stories are fun. And that was actually, you know, I had so much fun writing We Can Only Save Ourselves. And, you know, I think that's, you know, that's like such an important thing to.
I think that's such an important thing right now too. I had so much fun writing the zero gravity scenes in my second novel. And I have to say I'm back into sort of like the family drama mode with my third book. And I miss just the otherworldly aspects of writing, you know, where the laws of gravity are completely different than here. And there's something really important. So we did an AWP panel, like a pre-tape on writing and motherhood with some people that I know. And we were just talking about like how important it is right now when you have so little time, and you like the well is not full. Like you're not having time to like, you know, read widely and like go to events and like go to an art museum or travel and do these things that are kind of supposed to like fill the well, so that when you sit down to write, you feel like I have so much to say. And that like any moment you can find like play or fun or you know,
definitely.
And like reading with my kids is really the main way that I can do that. In a way that's, you know, it takes, we don't have to leave our house. We can. Right now, before bed, I usually do read individually with my kids, but recently we've started listening to The Hobbit. My kids do Legos, and like my husband and I do a puzzle or whatever. And my kids have gotten super into it, and they like look forward to it all day. And I just think
so cute.
Yeah.
And read me The Hobbit too. And, you know,
and it's, I don't know if we ever would have done that under normal circumstances, because, you know, you're going to swim practice and you're going here, and, you know, I wouldn't have I don't consider that my kids were overscheduled before, but we definitely were like driving around a lot to go to things. And, you know, you feel like, oh, well, you had a play date at their house, and you need to make sure you like reciprocate. And I mean, without all of those demands on our time, like I think, you know, reading and sort of things that are more artistic are definitely sort of like filling the cracks there, which is good if you're a writer, because it's like, okay, we get it like somewhere.
For sure.
Well, I think we are just about done. Alison, is there anything else you'd like to say in closing?
Just thank you, Kate, for being here. And Kate, so I met Kate at a Tin House writing workshop like several years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago. And we've just kind of kept up a little bit over social media. And it's just cool that.
I know, it's super cool.
It's really cool. And I was like, I hope she doesn't think I'm a like, you know, creep. Like I had sent her my book to read an early copy of it. And, you know, Kate was, of course, so generous and gracious. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Barbara's for hosting us. And, you know, it's been hard to launch a book during a pandemic, but this is actually just, I mean, it really has been so, everyone's made it so delightful. Thank you to everybody who has pre-ordered and left reviews or just sent like a nice message. Thank you. And y'all don't forget to pre-order Kate's book in the quick.
So we've got this button here, and you can still, after this is over, use the code EVENT to get 10% off Alison's debut novel, and then either of my novels or both, if you feel inclined.
Yeah, do it. And it's great, and I can't wait to read In the Quick.
And definitely let's find Barbara's books on looks like Facebook and Instagram. I am on Instagram and Twitter. I know, Alison, you are also on Instagram and Twitter.
Yes.
And
I'm at Alison Wisdom on Instagram, and then Alison L. Wisdom, because Alison Wisdom was taken, on Twitter. Who is this person?
Yeah, I'm at Kate Hope Day on all social media, and my website is katehopeday.com. But yeah, some of the things that we were talking about, I know you talk about on social media, you know, writing and motherhood and how to keep going with a project and all those things. That's part of like an ongoing conversation on social media. So if you're interested in those topics, like find us and say hey on those platforms.
Yeah. Okay. I think
that's all right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. Thank you. Thank you again, Kate. And thank you.
Oh, God. So fun. Let's do it again.